give a very heartfelt thank you for being invited to be here today. I understand this has been a month of celebration for your anniversary, and I'm very privileged to be here today, closing the month, and wishing another 7 years, many more years ahead for the group. When Marcelo and Andrea told me about the theme that they'd like me to talk about, which is the workers of the last hour, I was both happy and troubled. Because like most of the parable that we find in the Bible, they're so simple at first and so complex once we start really trying to understand them. I liken them sometimes the artsy French movies. The first reaction after you finish the movie, you haven't understand anything. You watch it again, you think you understand it, then you watch it a third time and realize that you missed the point completely, right? So are the parables. The study that I did was based on our dear book, The Gospel According to Spiritism. It's chapter 20, talks exactly about the workers of the last hour. And in fact, what it is, you probably know this, but I always like to remind people where we get our information. It was the third book, got that wrong. So it was the third book of the work of Kardec. And really is Kardec's thought into understanding better the stories that we have inherited from Jesus. Now from the point of view of the third revelation, Spiritism, bringing some new insights and some new ahas that up to that point were not fulfilling. The explanations did not fulfill us because we didn't have the complete picture. The book is divided in 28 chapters, and almost every Spiritist house is a must-have, is a continuous study of the Gospel. It is our moral bearings for all Spiritists that tells us how we should look upon the very difficult decisions we have in life, and how the Gospel give us, the right answers of how we should behave and how we should respond. So this parable, before we go there, it's another quote. Actually, this is right at the front page of the book, and I always find this an incredible quote, right? It talks about unshakable faith is the only kind that can stand face to face with reason in all human epochs. Kardec was a scientist, was a teacher, an educator, and he did not accept the idea that at whatever stage that we presently live, him almost 2 centuries ago, us now in the 21st century, that we know everything, that our understanding, that our knowledge provides us with the complete truth. To him, any faith needs to be able to accept that we are going to continue to learn and that we're going to continue to evolve our understanding. Just like I joked about the movie, is that every time we come and we experience these things, we have a different interpretation, a better interpretation. Our faith is not perfect. Our faith will evolve. And when I say ours, it's not just the individual spirit, it's the faith of all humanity. It needs to evolve as the human spirit evolves with it. So, today's study is around chapter 20. It is exclusively around the parable also known as the laborers in the vineyard. So I'm going to read to you what Jesus told us in this parable, and then we'll try to understand what it means, and then I'll prove you that we understand it all wrong. So he goes, the kingdom of heaven is like a father of a family who went out at daybreak in order to hire workers to work in his vineyard. So what do we know about Jesus' kind of analogies, right? Who is the father in this story? Of course, is God, right? So that's easy to understand. And who do you think the workers that he's talking about is? Well, are the spirits, us. So God wants us to work. Work where? What is the vineyard?
Planet Earth.
right now in this existence is the planet Earth. The vineyard is our existence, right? So it represents all of the work we do as spirits, and we're evolving. So think of that, keep that in mind. So the Father is God, we're the workers, the vineyard is our evolution, our work towards becoming better spirits. Having agreed with the workers that he would pay them 1 denarius per day, he sent them to the vineyard. Preparing for the study, I went in and looked at various different interpretations of this parable from different religious groups, from Catholics, from Protestants. And the first thing I learned is that first thing in the morning means 6 a.m. Right? So he goes out very early, 6 o'clock in the morning, finds some workers that want to work. They hire them on a per day basis and says, okay, I need you to work for 12 hours and I will pay you 1 denarius. According to what we know, that's a fair wage for the work they're going to do. Right? But that's not enough workers to do the job. So he went out again in the 3rd hour. So 3rd hour now, it's 9 o'clock in the morning of the day. And seeing others who were in the square not doing anything, he went to them and says, you go also to my vineyard and I will give you what is reasonable. And they went there. So first of all, what we see is that these workers, 3 hours later, weren't there at 6 o'clock in the morning to begin in. Otherwise, the Father would have asked them to work. Secondly, unlike the first ones, he didn't promise them a specific amount. He talks about reasonable. And the workers were fine with that. So now he's got more people working in his vineyard. Again, he went out on the 6th and the 9th. And he did the same. Finds new people there that weren't there at 6 or 9 and hires them to go work in the field and will pay them a reasonable amount. And then finally, he says, and having gone out at the 11th hour. So what is the 11th hour? So if the work ended at 6 p.m., he went there at 5 p.m., 1 hour before the work was the last hour, right? And he found others who were without anything to do and said to them, why have you stood around all day without working? Is it because you're lazy or you don't want to work? That wasn't the case, right? They told him that it was because no one had hired them. He then said to them, you two go to my vineyard. So he's got a whole bunch of people working in the vineyard. All right, some of them now for 12 hours, 9 hours, 6 hours, 3 hours, or just 1 hour. So at the end of the day, what happens? We work, we want to get paid, right? When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to the one who was taking care of his business, his accountant, I guess, call the workers and pay them from the last to the first. So who is the first that goes to receive the payment? The workers of the last hour, the ones who have worked 1 hour. Thus those who had not come to the vineyard except when the 11th hour was near received 1 denarius each. So here's the first kind of complication, right? He promised 1 denarius to the guys who worked 12 hours. Calls everybody in, puts them in line, puts the guys who worked least first, and pay them 1 denarius. Now you're in that line. You're looking, you're watching somebody get paid 1 denarius for 1 hour's work. So what's going through your mind now? No, not yet. Not yet, because you don't know how much you're going to pay. You're thinking, well, this is a very generous farmer, right? I am going to receive more than 1 denarius, because if he's paying 1 just for the fellows who work 1 hour, I'm going to receive more. So they're all in that expectation that now, not only will they receive what was promised, they're going to receive more because they've been at it. They deserve it, and they have some type of seniority over the fellows who were there for just an hour. Of course, the Lord doesn't work that way, right? Otherwise it would be too simple for us. Those who were hired first came in their turn, right? believing they would be giving more, but each one received no more than 1 denarius. So the father paid everybody the same amount, regardless of how many hours they worked. Upon receiving it, what everybody here said, right? Their feeling was, hey, this is not fair, right? They complained against the father of the family, saying, these last workers only once worked 1 hour. You have made them equal to us who bore the load of the heat of the day. I was here first. I worked for 12 hours from 6 a.m. through noon, got all of the heat, did a lot more work. I did 11 times more work, or 12 times more work than the fellows that came at 11 o'clock, right? So what does the father say? So he goes to one of them, and of course, when the father goes to one of them, he's responding to everyone there, and he said, my friends, I have done nothing wrong. Did you not agree with me on 1 denarius for 1 day's work? Take what belongs to you and go. As for me, I wish to give to the last as much as to you. It is not permitted for me to do what I want. And that's true, right? Nobody was promised more than 1 denarius. And you did your work, and you were paid for that work. So what's wrong with that? Do you really care what the other person earns? Why should be any of your business, right? And then finally, here's the real kicker. He says, and is your eye evil because I'm good? So has my goodness brought out in you some kind of wrong behavior, this jealousy, this envy, this evil, right? So am I the cause? Is my goodness, is your excuse for being rude to me and being demanding to me? So we know this parable more often for its very last phrase, right? And then the father completes by saying, thus the last shall be first, and the first shall be last. For many are called, but few are chosen. So we look at this from our material, limited view. We're kind of siding with the other workers. Right? Yeah, they were promised one, but what's the message this father is sending to these workers? Will not in the next day everybody want to work at the 11th hour and not spend the whole day because they're going to get the same amount? Why should they work 12 hours? What do you think? So, looked at a lot of different interpretations from different sects and different religions. Some of them describe that, well, what the parable is going to say is that it's not about a quantity of work, it's about the quality of work. That maybe the fellows that work 1 hour did just as good job as the fellows that did 12 hours. I don't particularly agree with that theory because nothing in the parable talks about quality. The father is not comparing anybody's work to the other. He's not judging. He doesn't say, you're going to get paid because you did such a great job. Others say that the parable really is a demonstration of God's endless charity towards us. That he was charitable to those who were neglected. The workers of the 11th hour were the workers that nobody wanted. So they made the analogy that they could be the poor, that segment of our population that is forgotten, that nobody wants to hire, that nobody wants, period. And that his generosity is a charity to everyone, regardless of whether you're wanted very much or not wanted. Everybody will have the same chance. I think there's a bit of truth in this, of course. We can't deny God's endless charity. But I don't think that this parable is about God, personally, right? It's not trying to demonstrate that God is charitable, because we know that. Jesus didn't have to be saying this over and over again. All of his parables, or at least most of them, are really directed towards us, so we can understand what we should be doing. So, if that explanation doesn't work, what does it mean? Well, to me, what it means is that working in the vineyards of God and the fields of God is working in our evolution. And what are we promised? What the Spiritism teaches us about that work. Why do we do it? We do it because we want to achieve communion with God, the perfection of the Spirit, the elevation of our soul based on our moral learnings. So if you think about it, if that is our payment, if that's the 1 denarius, can we put a value around it? Of course not. The true meaning of this parable to me is that those who necessarily been on this path working in the fields of God for the longest will have enjoyed the prize for all of that time. Could there be something more rewarding to that? The prize is the same, is that what in the parable describes the 1 denarius. But what we don't get, what we don't understand, is just having that 1 denarius is not a monetary symbol. It's a spiritual symbol. So we get that 1 denarius. That's what we've been promised. And once we get it, if we get it earlier, we're all going to be enjoying it the same. And it doesn't matter which paths others have taken to achieve that same goal. The prize is so wonderful that we won't care. Part of being there is understanding that we all have the divine right to achieve it. And God, in His generosity, will make sure that we have that opportunity. Even those who have maybe questioned and not wanted to join at first. In the Gospel, according to Spiritism, the Spirits give us yet an explanation what this means for us Spiritists. So let's read what they tell us. So they say, "Good Spiritists, my dearly beloved, you are all workers of the last hour." So what's the analogy here? If we're the workers of the last hours, who are the workers of the first hours?
The Jews.
The Jews. Then the Christians are the workers of the 3rd and the 6th hours and so forth. We are the workers of the last hour. And why is it important for the spirits to position us in that way? Because a lot of people were questioning, Spiritism is not changing anything, and I haven't been involved with any of this religious stuff. Can I still make it? Can I still achieve that 1 denarius, that goal that is promised by God? And the answer we're going to hear is yes, you can. And there's more to it. The one who says, "I began work at daybreak and will finish only at nightfall," will be very proud. You all came when you were called. Some a little earlier, some a little later. To the incarnation whose shackles you bear. However, for how many centuries has the Lord been calling you to this vineyard without you wanting to enter? Isn't that true? How many incarnations have we not been spiritists? Well, as far as I'm concerned, every single one up to now. Others may have had that opportunity to become spirit. But remember, Spiritism's only been around for 150 years. At best, we had 2 incarnations, some maybe 3. So, there's thousands of other incarnations that we've had that we were never exposed to this 3rd revelation. But we were being called by Jesus for the last 2,000 years. We just couldn't understand the call. We didn't know how to make our way to the square. That's why even though we had the opportunity, we weren't actually coming to the vineyards. So that's interesting. So the spirits are positioning Spiritism and the Spiritists as those workers of the last hours. And obviously, with that comes the promise that we will achieve the same denarius. Even though we're starting now at the beginning of the 3rd revelation, not at the beginning of the 1st. Now is the time for you to receive your wages. That's what we've been promised. No more, no less. Employ the time you have remained well, and never forget that your existence, no matter how long it may seem to you, it's only a fleeting instance in the immensity of time comprising eternity to you. So now he's putting into context that even though in our head, in our physical limitations of what hours are, and what is the first hour, what is the 11th hour, in the infinite, the eternal period that lies ahead, the 11th hour is going to be very long. Because there's so much time still ahead of us to enjoy and rejoice on the rewards that have been promised to us, that we will work to achieve. Notice that in the parable, nobody is paid for not working. Everybody must do the work. Those who are lazy, those who don't want to work, they don't even show up in the parable. So we can conclude that they not yet deserve their payment. We will deserve our payment, but only if we work, even if for 1 hour. As the last to arrive, Spiritists profit from the intellectual endeavors of their predecessors, because humans must inherit from humans, and their endeavors and results are collective. God blesses solidarity. So we can't be so vain to think that we're going to start from scratch in the 11th hour, that everything that was done before, to the first, to the second revelation, the early Christians who suffered and died to keep the word of the Lord present in this world, that none of that is part of who we are. We build upon all of those that have come before us. That solidarity is that makes us brothers and sisters, that connects us one to each other. Even those who have not yet come to work in the vineyards, they are also part of our path. We learn from them, and we also teach them. And God blesses solidarity. Even though our evolutionary journey is individual, we must trail our own path. We never do it alone. More than that, we learn in Spiritism that if we don't help our brothers and sisters to come along, we will reach a certain limit that we can't progress. We can't achieve higher levels of moral correctness if there's so much immorality still around us. It's simply not in us. We need to clean everything up, help everyone achieve higher levels of evolution, and then we'll be prepared to go to the next stage. The evolutions of planets require that. So never assume that the workers of the 11th hour are going to ignore all of the other ones who came before them. Reincarnation, that wonderful tenet, both immortalizes and defines spiritual filiation. The Spirit understands the continuity of the task, interrupted but always resumed once again. And all workers of the first and last hour, with their eyes open to the profound justice of God, no longer complain, but simply worship. When God says that the last will be first and the first will be last, He's not implying that something along the way will run out of space and the first who are now last won't be able to go in. We'll all have our reward. So we'll come back to that phrase and try to understand a bit what it means. Here it's saying that we need to understand that this learning, this 11th hour, is not this life only. We've become spiritists, probably most of us, in this life, but we will carry that on and we'll continue that work for all of the lives that follow. And that's the 1 hour that we have to work. That's the continuous effort that our spirit is committed to in order to receive its payment. This is the one meaning, true meanings of the parable. Like all the parables that Jesus addressed to the people, beneath it forms and images. It contains the seed of the future as well as the revelation of that magnificent unity that harmonizes all things in the universe, and that solidarity that reconnects all present beings to the past and the future. So this is in the gospel, and it's a message from the Spirit Henri Heine in Paris. But there are other messages in the same chapter. The time is near for the fulfillment of those things proclaimed for the transformation of humankind. Blessed will be those who have worked in the Lord's field selflessly and with no other motive than charity. So now this is telling us that to work in the fields of the Lord is not just kind of any type of work. There's a specific work that is required. And that work is first and foremost centered around what? Charity. Within what is the simplest definition of charity? Love in action. Right? Our evolution is our learning and our blossoming of the divine seed that has been planted in every spirit, and we bring out the love that's inside all of us to its full ability, to its full potential. And we do the love, we have love as a feeling, but in terms of work, love is only represented to the charity that we do to ourselves, to our family, brothers and sisters, and in fact to everyone, every other spirit. God is taking a census of His faithful servants, and is taking notes of those who only have the appearance of devotion, so they may not usurp the wages of the courageous servants, because it is for those who do not recoil before their task that God will entrust the most difficult positions in the great work of regeneration through Spiritism. And these words will be fulfilled. The first will be the last, and the last will be the first in the kingdom of heaven. There's another passage in Matthew 21, a very short parable, related, but a different point. And it goes like this. The father, obviously the same father that we've been talking about, goes to his son and asks the son to work in the vineyards. So the son says, "Sure, I will work." But then he doesn't go. The other son, he goes and asks the other son the same question. The other son says, "No, I won't go." But then he thinks better, reconsiders, and then he goes to work. So many of us have done this before. We have said that we will work in the vineyards of the Lord. But then when the time comes to actually work, and then work is all the charity we need to do, we don't do it. We may think we're doing it, we may fool ourselves, but we don't do it. And this is what this passage is saying, is that God is making a note of that. Because you are not actually doing the work. So you will not be paid your denarius. Now, for those who may be saying no for many centuries, who were reluctant to take on the call to do the work, and they eventually come around and they realize that they have to do it, and they go and do the work, those will be rewarded. The book talks a lot about, I haven't put it in here, about those who begin the work in Spiritism in their own self-knowledge and improvement and charity, but along the way they give it up for many different reasons. They don't have the perseverance to continue doing that work. That, my friends, is not good enough. Once we start the work, it cannot stop. No matter when you started, whether you were the first or whether you're the last, The key message is that we need to move on. We need to continue with our work. Only through that effort we will receive the payment. And we all receive the same payment. That is so wonderful, so blissful, that we will not care how the others have achieved them. We will help them achieve them. So in the parable, not only are the workers that were there first working more, they probably would have helped the workers of the last hour to finish their work. Because, as we said, this is what God wants for us, to work together, to evolve and achieve that payment together. So here's the call, really. This chapter is essentially a call for spiritists to work. Describing ourselves as the workers of the last hour. And again, as Marcelo rightly said, the last hour compared to all of the other religions, all of the other thoughts that were there in place, we have come late to the game. But don't forget, because of the nature of the Spirit and through our reincarnation, we were probably one of those workers in the first hours as well. We may not have been. We may have been pagans. We may have been other types of atheists. But most of us probably had many lives under different religious beliefs. So the workers of the first hours and the workers of the last hours could be, in fact, the same workers. Now, Jesus could not explain this 2,000 years ago. It would simply be too difficult to understand that notion of time and multiplicity of lives that we have. But now we are the workers of the last hour. We have a commitment, a contract with the Father. And we will only get paid if we live up to our part. No matter when we start, we all have that chance of achieving the same payment. So I love this slogan that we find in the Spiritist Federation of Florida, that I am Spiritist. It is a declaration of your commitment, of our commitment. Not only to ourselves, to other Spiritists, but also to everyone who is not a Spiritist. It is through our work that we evolve. Studying is important, but we have to go out one day and start applying those lessons. We have to come to our center and not just watch the lecture, but participate as volunteers. Find something that you do well. It's collaborative. Nobody does everything. Can never work that way. Every one of us has an important and unique role to do. Whether you're providing lectures, whether you're helping the technology side, whether you're doing the children education, whether you're coming here just to mop up the floor and clean up the house. All of these are necessary. All of these are worthy. And all of this is part of our contract with the work that we promise to do. The study of the gospel is a fundamental part of every Spiritist life. As I said, every Spiritist center at one point must begin an ongoing, continuous day, or more days, where we have the opportunity to study the gospel. It is the type of book that every time you read it, whether you read it at the center, you read it when you do your gospel at home, you learn something new from the very same passages you have read 10, 15 times. Why? Because we are never the same person every time we read it. Every day, every minute that goes by, we're changing. The law of progress tells us that we're always changing for a little bit better, even when we don't realize it. But you know what? Reading the gospel and then understanding it now through new eyes provides you with an insight that you are evolving, that you are getting better. In our center in Toronto, we have every Wednesday, and I'm sure you have your studies here, we study the gospel. And in fact, for those who might be interested, it's always broadcast live in the internet. We encourage people to log on. We have our students or workers present there in person, but typically we have anywhere from 5 to 12 people, some even from Brazil, joining us for the study. And it's fascinating, the points and the questions that people bring. Studying yourself, the gospel, it's good, it's important. But when you're together with other similar persons that they have the same interests, that understand or trying to understand Spiritism, and you see their points of view, it's fantastic. Things that you have never thought about come across. New questions. Our world is constantly changing. Our society is under tremendous pressure to adapt quicker and quicker to these changes. Whereas before changes took multiple generations, now social changes are occurring in a matter of 3 to 5 years. How do we prepare for that? How do we prepare to be true workers of the last hour? It's by being together. It's by learning and studying and discussing these challenges together. So if you're not currently in a regular session to study the gospel, I would strongly encourage. You're going to find that it's very rewarding. And it's very important for every Spiritist. Because what's told, what's described to us in this study is the work that we promise to do in the vineyards of the Lord. So if you don't know what work is expected of you, how can you expect the rewards? So that was my lecture for today. We do have some time for, thank you very much for listening to my thoughts.